Hi class, I'm Tom Blackman, and for this presentation we're going to discuss the vulnerabilities of our GPS satellite systems. The agenda for this presentation is: what is a GPS? What are the components? How does it work? We'll discuss the vulnerabilities, impacts, focusing on financial markets, and risk mitigation measures. So what is GPS? Well, GPS stands for Global Positioning System. It determines ground position of an object through trilateration. What this means is that three satellites are communicating with the receiver and triangulates the position of a certain object. It's used in navigation for maritime, land, and air. A majority of us use it in our daily lives to determine where the closest restaurant is, in our business travel. Once we pick up our rental vehicle, plug in the address of the hotel to help us navigate an unknown road network to get us there. It's used in search and rescue operations, especially with those who have a personal locator beacon, which is a device that can send a distress signal and actually contact the nearest rescue team to dispatch it out to your location. And most importantly, it also synchronizes time. So how does GPS work? Well, GPS satellites are in a medium Earth orbit, which according to our text is roughly 6,000 miles above the Earth's surface. There's a minimum of 4 GPS satellites needed to make a constellation. Well, wait a minute, we said that it takes 3 GPS satellites to communicate with the receiver to triangulate position. Well, there's a fourth unknown variable out there that may cause the satellite to lose communication with the receiver for a split second, so the fourth GPS is needed to ensure constant communication. There are 24 satellites needed for global coverage. As you can see in the picture to the upper left, it depicts that a receiver is receiving 8 visible satellite hits. Now, the more satellite hits the receiver gets, the more accurate of a coordinate that it has. And the only way that GPS communicates is through a control segment and a user segment, as depicted in the picture below. And the constellations that do exist currently are GLONASS for the Russian, Galileo for the European Union, GPS for us, and Beidou for the Chinese. Now, Chinese is a little bit different because they have 5 satellites in the GEO orbit, which is the orbit that follows the rotation of the Earth. So what comprises of a GPS satellite? Well, the picture to the left, you'll see that a satellite has a bunch of antennas and sensors in order to transmit and receive data. It also has solar panels to gain energy from the sun. And the most important critical components are the atomic clocks. You have the passive hydrogen master clock, which is the primary timekeeper that maintains accuracy of 0.45 nanoseconds over a 12-hour period, and the rubidium clock, which is the backup timekeeper if the PHM were to fail, and that has an accuracy of 1.8 nanoseconds over 12 hours. So now we're going to discuss some of the vulnerabilities of our satellite systems. The first one being space and weather effects. As you can see, the sun causes solar flares or bursts of energy, which charges towards the Earth with particles and is drawn to the poles and collide with atmosphere, and it causes polar lights. A great example of this is the Carrington event of 1859, which is the most significant event to date on solar flares and its disruptions. So it was discovered by Richard Carrington. He was a British astronomer who witnessed this and made the linkage between the solar flare and the geomagnetic activities that were happening on Earth. Some of the things that were seen with the northern lights were seen as far south as Cuba or Honolulu. You can see the southern lights in Santiago, Chile. The flares allowed the people in the northeast to be able to read their newspapers just from the aurora. And of course, the telegraph operators, or the internet of the time, saw sparks flying from their equipment, which actually caused some fires. So when astronomers and people that study space and one of their main concerns is another Carrington event happening in the future. Uh, and so one of the questions I pose is, are we prepared for another Carrington event? And we'll continue to discuss this as we roll along. But they do have uh, solar weather predictive patterns established, along with systems and tools so they can predict the next Carrington event. Space trash is another vulnerability to our GPS constellation. So as you can see in the picture to the bottom right, there was really not much of anything in 1957 just because of the amount of space exploration that was going on. As we progressed towards the early 90s, that's when we started shooting up satellites into orbit so we can transmit signals, broadcasting stations, and so forth. And as we've evolved over time and our technologies have grown, as you can see in 2018 picture, the amount of space junk that is orbiting our planet. And of course, it's predicted to get even worse over the next couple decades. So currently, we only have two methods of disposal. One is to slowly stop the satellite or slow it down and let it fall and burn up upon reentry onto the Earth. And that's assuming that that satellite is close enough. If it's not close enough, then the other is to push it into a higher orbit to get it out of the way. So GPS jamming is becoming a prevalent threat to our GPS devices. These jamming devices can be made extremely cheap, less than $10, and they can have major disruption, causing delays and a huge amount of time lost. A great example of this is the Newark Liberty International Airport incident in 2009. A gentleman did not like the fact that his employer was tracking his whereabouts through a GPS tracking device that they've installed in the company vehicle. So he decided to go out and get parts for less than $10 and put them together to stick in the cigarette holder or the 12-volt plug-in of the vehicle to jam the signal. And every day for 3 months, around lunchtime, he would drive by the airport, and it would just mess up the GPS devices that are installed in the aircraft for landing and takeoff, for the air traffic controllers. And for these short disruptions, they checked their systems and noticed everything was fine. They finally tracked the perpetrator down and caught him. And the FCC fined the guy $32,000. And actually, if you're purposely jamming, it could lead to significant jail time. Another threat to GPS jamming is our adversaries creating arsenals, as depicted in the upper right-hand corner. Now, those devices or those vehicles actually have to lock into a satellite and push enough energy up to block the signal. It's a lot easier to block a receiver at a local level. However, the area affected could be less than a few miles. Spoofing is becoming extremely prevalent in today's digital environment. Criminals are spoofing or tricking GPS receivers into thinking it's in one location when in reality it's in another. In this other location, they're actually setting up ambushes so that they can stop the vessel carrying the cargo in order to rob it. Other activities of spoofing is with drones. That's how criminals are actually stealing drones and information off of them. And it's going to be extremely important for the trucking industry to figure out how to combat this as they continue to talk about going more towards driverless trucks. And last but not least, a kinetic threat. China is actually developing a first strike space laser, which actually locks onto a satellite through a precision targeting system that they've developed, and it is capable of destroying NATO satellites. Our other adversaries, North Korea, Iran, and Russia, have also developed weaponry aimed at satellites. So anti-satellite weapons will be a must in future wars. So how does GPS impact the market? Well, GPS is a single point of failure for the entire economy, according to Bloomberg Businessweek. There are over 2 billion GPS receivers in use around the world. Even though most financial markets and critical services have their own backup systems, their own atomic clocks in case of disruptions, any sort of subtle anomalies introduced could be a spoofing to throw the timing off just a little bit, could affect the algorithms, leading to mass sell-offs. Other issues that you could see is the timeliness of your trades. Do you get to sell that stock that you wanted for $14 a share, even though it hits it at a millisecond? Does it still go through? Or your ATM? Is your ATM communicating? Most likely, if the timing is off, you will not be able to draw your money. And then, of course, with your cell phones, they may not be working effectively like they should be, or not working at all. So some of the mitigating solutions that are available. If we were to experience another Carrington event that would destroy a majority of our satellites, we could quickly deploy cube satellites using a vessel similar to that of SpaceX's Falcon 9 to quickly deploy and reestablish our constellation using these satellites that are the size of your Amazon boxes. In a GPS jammed environment, we could actually use a system like the ELORAN, where we could use radio signals, long range and short range, through a tower to triangulate our position coordinates as well as communicate effectively. And you could use this with maritime, land, and air. The other thing we could do is make setting up a backup system in the United States a priority. Our budgetary committee actually canceled a LORAN system because they deemed it a duplicate system of our GPS. We also need to implement better encryption techniques for our GPS bands, as well as reduce the world economy's dependence on GPS, or at least have a pretty decent backup. So my questions for the class is, how would you be impacted if GPS were to go out? How would your business be impacted? Do you think we should start reducing our dependency, or at least creating a better backup system? What are the mitigating solutions can you think of? And would you be prepared if GPS stopped working? I really hope you enjoyed my presentation. Here are the list of references that I used. Please comment on below, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you. Bye.